Welcome to Talking Tuesday. I am your host, Fancy Quant, and today we're going to be talking about me quitting my job. So this is a kind of an odd topic to talk about, especially on a podcast. As many of you know, I avoid almost exclusively mentioning who I work for, why I work for them, anything under the sun related to corporations, because in general, companies don't like that you talk about you, and banks specifically don't like that you talk about them, so I haven't really talked about it. But I'm going to start way at the beginning. So this has been years in the making and talking about how I view my career and how I kind of dive into different angles and how I think about things and trying to get my head around the job you're currently in, the position you're currently in, understanding where you're at, understanding where you want to go, and then how to get there. So I'm always kind of have my ear to the ground, as they say, right? I'm always looking for opportunity. And the reason for this is I'm not necessarily unhappy where I'm at job-wise when I'm at a company. I just like to keep my options open. So I don't feel like I am like married to any specific job, right? I don't owe them anything. They don't owe me anything. It's a mutual agreement that I come to work, I do my job, I do excellent work for you, you pay me money, and that's basically the transaction. And of course, there's a lot more to this as well from an employee standpoint. So yes, I do my best. I build relationships with my teams that I'm on. There's a lot more to it. But in general, when it comes to opportunities, right, you never know when an amazing opportunity is going to come up. And so over the last few years here, it's been more or less like companies have been hiring a bit more. This was pre-pandemic. So man, it might have been 3-4 years. But I'm always kind of listening, and companies are coming out. There's these big companies and they start saying, we're looking for this position. And they're hiring the same position over and over and over again. So this is somewhat of a red flag to keep an eye out for. And so I start calling up, on my cell phone, and I talk to a buddy of mine and I'm like, hey man, what's going on with your bank's hiring this type of position? It seems to be a lot of these positions. What's going on? And so you start getting inside tidbits here. If you know people at different banks, like, oh, this team, this validation team, for example, it's been turned over like 4 times in the last handful of years. This guy came in, he did X, Y, and Z, this happened. And then he left, and then this lady came in and she did X, Y, and Z, and she brought these types of people in, and this is why it's not working. And then a third person came in and he's going through this process. Like, okay, good. Okay. Like, I got it. Like, I get the picture. This is not the place for me. And then a few other companies reached out, and one of them, which was just shockingly bad. So this is what happens when you don't really know what you're doing or what you're hiring for. They contacted me and wanted me to come apply there. I believe I applied online first, so I think I'm the initial person that reached out. And then what ended up happening was they interviewed me and they're like, oh, you're great, you're wonderful. We really want to interview you for a second round. But when I went through the entire interview, it was like, hey, what we're looking for and what you actually do don't match. And they're listing out like a bunch of governance-y tasks and jobs. And then it started being like, it's really an analyst level, but we call you a manager. And they're trying to pitch it to me as like, this would be right on par with where I'm at. And I could realize from that point, the salary was going to be nowhere near where I'm at currently. The responsibilities are lower than where I'm at. It's just not going to be a good fit. And so when I was done with it, I went through the whole interview. I was nice, pleasant, trying to learn as much as possible about that position. And then when I finished up, I emailed their HR connections staff there, as well as the individual that I interviewed with, and said, hey, I really appreciated your time. I enjoyed it. However, I don't think it's going to be a good fit for me personally or for you as a company because these are my skills and background. This is really what I'm looking for, and this just doesn't seem to be a good fit. And then surprisingly, I thought that would be the end of it, right? They would say, okay, no problem. Thanks for your time, and move on. But no, this other company decided their HR would email me somewhat of a threatening letter. If you do not email or you do not interview for these next few rounds, we will not consider you for any future jobs. So I'm looking at him like, who do you think you are? Like, this is entertaining. Like, you're treating people like crap. You have terrible HR policies here. I don't know why this is HR. Like, this isn't even like an employee there that knows better or doesn't know better, I guess. It's HR who should know better because they're human resources. And so they basically put this threat out there, and I thought, well, screw them. I don't want to work there if you're going to treat me like that. And your job, the person interviewing clearly didn't know what they're interviewing for. Like, the person that made the job posting and made the title for it is a catchy title, but the responsibilities and the job and the pay were not what it was advertised as. So I basically told him, like, I really appreciate your time, but I'm not interested in interviewing. So thanks. Like, I'm done. And then interestingly, like 6 months, I think it was like 6 months, maybe 4 months, 6 months later, the guy I interviewed with emails me and says, hey, my colleague's hiring for this other position. It's, this, that, and the other. I think you'd be a great fit for this. Why don't you interview for it? So I interviewed for this, and I read through the job posting, which they sent to me the day before the interview. So they didn't give it to me like a week or two before when they asked. They wait until the day before and they send it to me. And I read it, and it's like requirements. Finance degree, or, preferred, like maybe econometrics, stats, math, financial engineering, something like that. And then it goes on to list out, like, they want this job to do all this validation work and all this governance work. And then the majority of it's governance work. And it seems like the person hiring, someone looked them up, had a finance degree background, and they're wanting to hire another finance person to do this job. But it's supposed to be a validation job, they call it, but it's really a governance job. And so I emailed the lady and I said, I appreciate it. I'm not going to waste your time. I'm not interested. Here's the reasons why this job posting says it's a validation job, says it's a quant job. And you even list that, but the degree's not. They wanted weird certifications like, CFA was really meaningful and important to them. No, that's not important for the quants. And it just had a bunch of like really red flags. So I went through and I critiqued it and explained to her, like, this is not what you're looking for. This is what you're looking for, and you should label it that way, and this is why. The way you're listing it, though, you're not going to get people applying because this isn't a real job. Like, people don't exist that have a finance business background who are going to work in validation, who are then doing governance, but then also are doing part of validation, stats work. Like, a business student's not going to have those skills, and a quant's not going to want to take this job. And they were, like, offended on it and sent me an email complaining, I believe. And so I was like, wow, well, I definitely don't work for your firm at all. Like, the guy's really nice interviewed with, but your HR is a real pain in the backside. And then the lady I interviewed with for the other position was a real pain in the backside. And I'm just trying to be helpful, and provide you some tips and pointers as someone who's been in the industry for quite a while here on the quant side, which clearly you have never really done. So, and then I found out later the whole team was brand new and they're trying to develop it out. But instead of looking at me saying, hey, this guy has a lot of expertise, he's been doing this for 7 years, he's in a higher position, right? He's built out entire teams, structures, and policies and things like these on the software side. He's done the quant side. No, they knew better than everybody else. And even the firm they ended up buying out and part of this whole debacle of things I was looking at, I think they had a really good team, it sounded like, before. And then this new company decided they knew better than everybody else. So definitely was not a fit here, right? This is where you don't want to go. And then, as I mentioned, there's a bunch of big corporations. And then, of course, the first episode of this entire season, working with a crypto firm, that whole process there. But I've just been turning things down because they don't perfectly fit. And so that leads me to talk about where I'm at currently, right? I've been working at Santander, so I'll announce it here as everyone knows. It's not a big secret. You can go on my LinkedIn and see. I've worked there for, I think, 6 years this month. So I got hired on to do credit risk modeling. I started in New York City in the New York office in Midtown. My boss and my boss's boss, who I worked with quite a bit, they all sat in different states down the East Coast, so didn't see them very much. I had a teammate, though, in the New York office, which was awesome. Someone to talk to, someone to interact with, fun stories with her. And I worked there for a year, and then I realized it was way too expensive to live in New York City. My wife and I wanted to start a family. I wanted to have a life outside of living in an apartment in New Jersey. And so I needed to do something different. I needed to leave. But I liked the job. I liked the managers. I liked the people. I liked our head of validation. The directors are fairly nice to me around the firm. The head of governance, the governance people are all super nice. I had no reason to leave, but I wanted to do something different than New York City and New Jersey in that tri-state area. And so what I ended up doing was finding out that Santander at the time was pushing for remote work to save on office space, especially in the New York office. And a lady I worked with, I guess I didn't work with her, but she worked for the same company, and she worked somewhere else in the building. We rode the bus together. She lived in the same apartment building. She was saying that she was going to do this new gig where they were wanting people internally to work from home full time. They'd pay for you to fly in, or you could pay on your own or something to travel in like once a month. And I was like, this sounds pretty good, but I don't think I can swing it, right? I'm not a senior person. I don't have a lot of experience. And so I went and talked to my boss, so the senior director at that time, and he used to work and run the Dallas team in Texas. And I messaged him and said, hey, I love being on your team. I love working here at Santander. I want to move to Dallas again. I'm wondering if it's possible if I can transfer to the Dallas office. And he goes, let me look into it. I'm just letting you know, like, the Dallas office is kind of a mess sometimes, but it's no big deal. I'll look at it. You can work for me from there. So I go, awesome, let's do it. So he looks at it, he comes back, says, yeah, you can transfer down there, you can move and everything. Basically, everything will stay the exact same. You just need to move on your own dime to make it happen. So I go, all right, I'll do this. I don't want to be in New York City anymore. Now, don't get me wrong. I love New York. It's amazing for career opportunities, but it's just not family friendly and life friendly if you want to do anything besides a career. So we ended up moving down to Dallas. I worked for my boss for a little bit longer and then ended up being transferred to a new senior director down there in Dallas. And I was now going to specialize on credit risk modeling. Now, instead of for the North American division, it's going to be specifically for Santander Consumer, so SC as we call it, who specializes in auto loans, which is awesome. A whole new experience, a whole new product line. I was doing more of like mortgage and other types of accounts up in the Northeast. Now down in Texas, I'm doing auto, which is awesome. And I transferred. I wasn't too happy at first that they were transferring me directors, right? My director's still there. They could still use me. And then I started kind of figuring out that, okay, my director wants to retire, has been needing to retire for a while just because like he's done. He doesn't want to be working anymore. He needs to move on. He wants to do other fun things with his life. And I completely understand that. And so he was still kind of working remote, but they kind of got rid of his team. And then once he retired, they shuffled everyone to different directors. So my boss and my other colleague, she went to work for a different director out of the Boston office. And then I ended up going to Dallas, which I was already there, just transferred directors and worked there. And so that was awesome and fun. And then career-wise, I started building up a reputation in Dallas. It took me years to do this. So I'm not someone who runs into a room yelling and screaming. I'm a genius at the top of my lungs, and I've worked with many people that have done this. I'm the guy that just wants to show you, like, just give me the quant work, give me the math, give me the stats, let me work on modeling, whether it's validation or developing models or whatever. I can do it. I can handle it. And I'm kind of that weird personality where you can throw at me new things that no one else has seen, and I can come back with a massive stack of academic papers and textbooks and explain exactly how to do it, why to do it, the pitfalls, the assumptions behind it, why they do or don't work. I've seen it all. I've done all kinds of crazy stuff with this, and I really enjoy it. But it took me a few years to get to that point where both our head of validation finally realized, all right, Dimitri's getting really important projects now. He's making a massive impact. My colleague, who was the project lead on this, so I didn't technically work for him, just did amazing work and was really, really good. He's probably the best credit risk modeler, validator, credit risk in general, the best person I've ever seen. So I would hire him hands down anywhere I went. But working underneath of him, we were just the dynamic duo here. So I think I'm super good. He is also super good. When you put the two of us together, we were just knocking out projects left and right. We were doing amazing. Bonus-wise, my bonuses were doing great every year. They were super healthy at this point. My first year back in New York was subpar. In Dallas, I'm starting to get big, important projects. I'm somewhat the all-star on the team here. I'm running with it. I'm enjoying it. We're having a few team members that used to be kind of the focus of our team there. They were leaving. They were kind of the people that were yelling and screaming about how great and smart they were. And yet they went to go work somewhere else, which was fine. And so everything's kind of clicking for me over the years. I'm always kind of keeping my ear out, listening for good opportunities. Nothing's really coming about. But I'm happy where I'm at. I'm the all-star. I'm getting compensated with what I think is fair. I get promoted. So I was working out, I think, as like an associate or whatever, basically. And then I was made like a senior associate, which is like the highest level we could have in that position. And then eventually got to the point where a lot of the other directors and things I was kind of interacting with were kind of pushing for me to be a senior associate or an associate director, so they call it. Associate director here, where I would be managing teams just like my colleague was doing. And that was a bit of a struggle politically, trying to get things lined up. We had an open position on our team to do it. We couldn't find anybody. We interviewed people, just couldn't find anybody. I'd already been sitting there, I think, for 2 or 3 years at that point, waiting to get bumped. I think it was 3 years at that point. So I'm starting to get a little frustrated because I've already set for the 2 years, which should have been where my bump came. And I'm already all-star on the team, making everything happen. And I can't get that last bump here. But a few different political moves happened, and it came to the point where it was like, it wasn't me pushing for it now per se. It was like my old colleague was recommending me to like my boss and saying, Dimitri's the guy. He can do the job. I know you're hiring. You can't find anybody. You need to bump him up. And then later, from talking to the firm, there were other directors as well that were talking to the head of development saying, he's the guy that can do it. We've interacted with him, on these different random occasions. He's got what it takes. Make it happen. And so I basically got pushed through from our head of validation, like Dimitri needs to get bumped to associate director. He can take on a lot more responsibility. He can manage these projects. He can lighten the load for the team. And if he can manage someone as well, we can really get a lot of stuff done. And again, I don't think senior management understood my expertise per se, but everybody else was kind of pushing and backing it to the point that they realized, all right, he's a really good employee. We don't fully understand a lot of it until we had this really massive project that happened. And I think once that happened and it all kind of clicked in place, it was like, all right, he's got the skills. He's got the management technique. He works with people well. He's kind of he's the guy everyone wants to be basically at the firm. And so that all happened. And then all of a sudden, I think it was like 6 months to a year in maybe. I think it was maybe 6 months. It was pretty short, maybe 3 months. There was a complete shakeup. Our CEO left the bank. Our head of validation left the bank as well. They brought in new staff above for validation. They replaced all those ones. The new CEO came in. I think CROs got shuffled around between divisions and the entire corporation in the United States here. So everything got kind of just shaken up. So at this point, I'm like, all right, do or die. I'm going to just buckle down and we're going to stick this out for at least a year. Right? There's no reason to move at this point. It doesn't seem like they're looking to replace us. This isn't like a merger where you should be kind of worried about, okay, is the new company going to be taking roles of the old employees? What's going on? So I stuck it out for a while and we worked through it, but it started becoming apparent that there were some bottlenecks in the processes and how things were being done internally. Working with the Dallas team in general, I have built amazing relationships with a lot of people in Dallas. That's great. But there are also a few players in these kind of roles that are just kind of sticks in the mud and have made the process nearly impossible. Again, there's a lot of politics going into this. When I say this, people go, oh, yeah, everyone has politics. No. SC got bought out by Santander. It used to be a different company beforehand. It was owned by a different guy, and the culture was different. And it's never fully merged into Santander. So the consumer division that does auto really operates like by the seat of their pants. It's really a different culture internally. And I think one of the key parts here is the validation team specifically, so part of my team as well as all the governance teams and as well as a bunch of the senior management, so the CROs and executives, did a lot to get us to pass, like for example, C-car regulations. We fixed a ton of stuff to get past that hurdle. Did amazing. But working with Dallas is always just a little stressful because there's a cultural divide between the two, which makes the politics a bit different than a typical corporation where you have one company, one political structure. There's arguing between it, but having two separate structures just makes it really, really challenging. So that's kind of where it was sitting. And we were starting to get to the point where it was like, we're kind of bottlenecked. I'm not getting the projects I want anymore because they're getting divided out now between me and my colleague, which I completely understand. But it was getting to the point where it was like I was super busy and then I wasn't that busy at all. And then when things were coming in, for example, in expertise on like machine learning and data science, teams were being assigned to it that I didn't think were very knowledgeable in these areas. Again, they're not talking at conferences, they're not reading textbooks, they're not working with other banks. Like I can pick up a phone, call friends at different banks, figure out what everyone else is doing for the most part, take notes about it, figure it out, think about it, look at academic papers, come up with rulings, and then bam, we've got something in place. And when I was going through, I was criticizing what was happening with a lot of these different sorts of layouts. Again, all over the industry. This wasn't specific to any firm or even the firm I'm at, but I've been highly critical of the data science, machine learning side. And it wasn't that I was unhappy at this point. It's just that it's starting to realize that I'm fairly limited in my scope of career, right? I'm already an associate director. There's an opportunity for a director push, but realistically, the team that I'm on needs more analysts. We need more people lifting from the bottom. We don't need more people at the top. So even I can see this. It doesn't matter if they want to add someone, it's not needed. So even if it was bumped into a director role at this point, or even a senior director role, it's not going to add a lot of responsibility to my plate. It's not going to add a lot of bandwidth career-wise. I mean, we're just kind of going through the motions at this point. And the focus of the bank itself is just passing regulations, which makes sense. But there's not a lot of push for things like quantitative research, enhancing things through, I don't know, new methodologies. It's kind of like most banks, to be honest with you, where it's like they're all just kind of bumbling forward and hoping something occurs out of it. But when you look at the structure here, you start to analyze, where do you see the next opportunity coming from, right? And you should view this completely openly. Is it coming internally at your bank? Are there opportunities? It's much, much easier to work internally. Let me tell you, it looks better on a resume to have, 6, 7, 8 years at one firm versus jumping every 2 or 3 years. So it's a benefit to stay. Opportunity-wise, it's much easier. A lot of times you get promoted from like one position to the next position internally versus trying to go from your current position to a new higher position at a different bank. Especially when you get more senior, there's less and less and less senior roles available. And so you have to realize you can jump, from company to company a lot when you're younger. But if you start climbing that ladder position-wise, there's not a lot of opportunity. And so as I'm looking around, there's nowhere for me to really go here, right? Even if they bump me up one layer, it doesn't add a lot of responsibility to my plate. I'll get paid more, which would be amazing, but I'm really wanting to do something more impactful. And I hope part of the takeaway from that, the dream job that could pay, up to $500,000 made in episode 1. Realistically, it's going to be like a $250, I think, base pay or whatever. And then there's some other things that get piled into it or whatnot. The reality of that, though, is thinking about it from the standpoint of responsibility, right? I wanted that job because it had more responsibility. I'd have more impact on a company, on society, doing something very meaningful. In my current role, I just felt like I've reached the max point where I can't add any more value. It doesn't matter how many things I do. It doesn't matter how many training guides I've written, which I've done a ton for this company. It doesn't matter if they're not taking them seriously, right? You're not making an impact. It doesn't matter if you provide feedback on things and that feedback's not being taken, right? You're just wasting time now. And it doesn't matter if I wrote papers and I could write the world's most amazing, groundbreaking paper. It wouldn't impact what the team's doing, right? So my goals are now starting to deviate from the firm's goals. There's not a lot of opportunity for growth. Again, I'm getting paid. I'm helping the firm. They do need me to validate models. I do need them to help, pay my bills. So I'm collecting a salary from this. But at this point, I'm kind of like, I can stay, I can go. I don't know what to do. And so I finally get an offer that comes on the table. And it comes in and it kind of falls through. So I just leave it, right? I'm not getting involved with it. And I waited and I waited and I waited, and I'm still just working through things. Things are starting to get better at work at this point a little bit. We're getting projects going, right? Getting excited, getting going again. Pandemic's been kind of crushing on many of these responsibilities and jobs. And then the company that reached out to me in the first place, the different department reached out and said, hey, I heard you're the guy to do this job. We need somebody to come in and basically help run this validation team. We're looking for someone with some big bank experience. We're looking for someone that knows a lot about machine learning and data science to help set standards. We're looking for someone that's basically hands-on that can work with, development teams that are difficult, but also help kind of guide them, as well as, we need to really consider. So part of this whole process is you need to be able to understand their perspective as well and work with developers. So that's important to us. And they're starting to lay out, basically like it's going to be a director title. And I'm looking at like, it's a step above where I'm at, right? Director title. And at first I'm like, I don't know, right? It's a smaller bank that's contacted me and it's one step up. Compensation's quite similar to what I'm making. And at first I'm like, I don't think so. I'm not going to take this. And so they kept coming after me and saying, we'd love to have you come in and interview. Could you come in this next week? So I said, well, what's the harm in having a conversation? So I go through the conversation and then they start laying out, we need a lot of help with these different areas. You seem to have these expertise. We think you'd be a great fit. One of these things they mentioned is we really want someone that can teach and train. And we've seen your YouTube videos and it's great and wonderful. And then as I interviewed different people, everyone kept mentioning, we know you from YouTube. We know you from YouTube. I've seen this video and that video. We enjoyed it. You're really good at teaching. So now for me, I'm thinking about it like, okay, so it's an expanded role responsibility wise here, right? So I'm taking a step back on position, on bank size wise. So it's always good to be at this big, massive corporation, this big global bank. But at the same time, I'm getting now more responsibility to compensate for that step back. Salary is about the same. So it looks decent, right? Nothing like, I'm not getting like paid double or anything crazy, but it's about where I'm at. So I can't complain too much there. It would be nice to get bumped. But then they start talking about there's opportunity for growth in this, right? going through the motions with it. So I'm listening about, okay, there's growth opportunity here. Responsibility-wise, it will really grow out. So I've done a lot of the stuff they're asking for, but now my role's been kind of limited because we had this whole corporate shuffle in the last couple of years here. So I'm going to get back on track, more responsibility, do more exciting things. I can do teaching and training internally. The firm actually likes me at this point. So I'm going to be back in kind of this all-star position. And then I start to worry a bit, like, oh man, like this job's going to be a lot of stress. I've been working from home from so long. I like seeing my daughter, and my wife and working at home. I don't like having to go into the office. And then it's going to be a lot of stress and responsibility, right? They need someone to perform. And then I'm thinking about it like, well, I am the guy that makes things happen internally where I've been at in the last few companies. I do see things from an industry perspective, exactly what they're wanting, I've already done. So, it's not going to be too far of a stretch from what I'm really kind of talking myself out of at this point. And so I'm thinking about this, and then finally I'm waiting, and I go through a few more interviews with them. I'm really liking the company more and more. I like the people I'm interviewing with. And then the contract comes through, and it's sitting on my desk, I think on a Friday afternoon at 3 when it comes in. And so I'm pretty sure I'm going to take this, but I don't really know. Should I call my boss and tell her on a Friday I'm quitting, or should I wait until Monday? And I'm I don't want to ruin her weekend. That's kind of a, not nice move there. And then I'm really thinking about it over the weekend, and I'm I don't want to leave my colleagues, right? I don't want to leave the culture, the structure I built. I know people have posted articles on LinkedIn recently complaining about, work isn't family, it's toxic, whatever. But when I work somewhere, for the most part, a lot of the people start to become a close-knit family with, they know my kids, my wife, I know their kids and their wives' names. We have stories, we share a lot between each other. We know each other culturally, for example. We just know so much about each other, and it's just really, really hard to let go. And then as the weekend's going, and I'm all right, I'm going to do this. I'm really going to miss my colleagues over at Santander. And when I mean colleagues, I mean not just my personal team. I mean the people I worked with, even at the Dallas office. There's people there I've worked with, I have lunch with occasionally. I'm really going to miss them. And then I finally put in my 2 weeks on Monday, and I'm thinking I text my boss. So that's how I quit. I haven't told anybody. I text my boss, said, hey, I need to talk to you, or emailed her today. I need to just chat with you. I need 5-10 minutes. And so I'm getting super nervous at this point, and I'm not sure going in my head over how I'm going to quit. I'm not mad. I'm not upset. It's not I'm leaving on bad terms. It's not I'm dying to get out of there. It's just there's a better opportunity on the horizon now. And so I really need to move on and do things. And I know they need me there, but I really need to grow as a person and change with this. And so she finally messaged me and says, hey, I'll chat with you this afternoon. I believe it was 2:30, 3 o'clock. So I called and I told her, I hate to give you this bad news, but I'm putting in my 2-week notice. I'm going to be moving. And to my surprise, she was actually oh, congratulations. Do you mind telling me where you're going? So I told her, all the details on why I'm leaving, and it's a great opportunity and all this stuff. And it turned out to be much, much better than I thought. Again, I've built good relationships with my managers over the years. I've learned a lot from her on how to manage people and be in difficult situations. And it was just really a relief off my chest that she understood why I was leaving. She said she wasn't surprised I was leaving. She knows that I'm very motivated, and there seems to be basically kind of a roadblock for me where we've kind of run out of opportunities internally. And so it makes sense I'm going on to something bigger and better. So at this point, I'm free to go. And then I go back into the office later in the week. I think it was on a Friday of that first full week there. And I go back to clean up my desk, and we still have COVID policies. And of course, IT's removed all of my access. I can't get it to the floor I'm at. And this takes a whole debacle to get up to my floor finally. And I get there, and there's no one even on my floor. Not one person. So we're not even back in office yet. I'm cleaning up my desk, and again, going through everything. Make sure you give everything back to them. Documents, hardware, laptops, mice, anything and everything under the sun. Just give it back to them. You're not going to need any of it. Trust me. I know a lot of employees are all excited, oh, I really want to keep, this project or this document or whatever. Don't do it. It's against the law. It's theft of the bank. Trust me, you will remember the important details in your head if you need something, but don't keep anything. The bank I was going to even had a policy where they said, do not bring any documents from your past employer. Basically, you can be terminated for it. So don't do it. So I had to go through my desk and clean out all these projects and files, things I'd kept over the years from working there. Got rid of all those. And then that's when it really hit me, and it was somewhat of a really sad moment of like, it's like you're dying yourself and you're leaving all your friends behind. Because I know that I called all my friends up on, during the week and told them, hey, I'm leaving, I'm going to miss you guys, this is where I'm headed, this is what I'm doing. But at the same time, it's like I know even if they come back to the office and they're working, it's going to be extremely challenging to meet up with these people. And relationships change, people move on. So it's kind of a sad and challenging part. And even when I left my first job at Comerica, it was a similar feeling of like, I'm excited to move on, but I'm actually sad I'm leaving this nice, comfortable culture and the people I know and the expectations that are there for me. And jumping to any new job is somewhat stressful because you don't really know what you're going to get out of it. So I'm cleaning out my desk, get this all cleaned out here, and I've called all my colleagues up, let everybody know for the most part here, and now I'm basically ready to move on. So I'm going to kind of wrap the podcast up here, but this is kind of this first part of going through the quitting process, looking at the opportunities. Some of the takeaways here is looking at what you're leaving and what you're getting, right? So a lot of times people get mad, frustrated, even when they're in a bad situation. It's important to look at what are you getting out of it. Even a lot of times with my scenario, I think a lot of people have been like, why are you going to a smaller bank? Right, you're getting this dinky title bump, whatever. Why are you going to a smaller bank? But I think a lot of times position and title do really matter. So don't get me wrong on that. But a lot of times looking at the responsibilities that you're going to get, things that you can add to your resume moving forward, and also realizing you can use that to build new relationships at a new bank. These are all really important things. Again, I still stay in contact with all my colleagues from Comerica at my first job. I still go to lunch with them occasionally, grab coffee. I'm really excited, hopefully, that a lot of my career has been built in and around Dallas in the sense that I'm hoping to stay in contact with a lot of my current employees now that I'm leaving, that we can kind of meet up as well. Again, you're always going to need these relationships. Trust me, they come in handy over the future. Even when you have like a really frustrating day and you just want to strangle someone at work, calling up an old colleague sometimes and just chatting to see how they're doing can make a world of difference. So anyways, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. If you like this, don't forget to subscribe on YouTube. Give me a thumbs up. If you're on the podcasting app, don't forget to come back and check for more episodes. Anyways, thanks for listening. And as always, until next time.